Today, I would like to talk about we are not created for pleasure, but for joy. And I would like to begin by reading a very short, at least part of a poem by Mary Oliver. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. I've been thinking a lot about how things are changing, what we have to hold on to, how to let it go. Yesterday, I received a communication from somebody via social media in response to something I said. He said, "How can I feel grace when genocide is happening in the Middle East? Isn't that selfish for me to feel grace? This seems so different from any life-threatening illness I've experienced or faced with loved ones who died." At this, about a week ago, in my little community here of Fairfax, right on the edge of the suburbs, over the hill is the beginning of rural life. There were 6 teenage girls, aged 14 and 16, in a sports utility vehicle who were about a mile away from here on a rural road, coming around a corner. Somebody swerved into their lane. The girl who was driving drove off the road into a redwood tree. The car caught on fire. 4 girls died. The doors wouldn't open. Seatbelts wouldn't release. 2 survived. And as you can imagine, this is a rather small community. It's really created a great deal of sadness, a great deal of reaching out and support. The Living Dying Project is part of that support. As well as that, I have a new client who's also a teenage girl who is probably dying today. And during these 5 weeks, the current Trump administration has been going out of its way to create chaos, to create suffering, to without going into the details, you're probably as aware of that as I am. So going back to this fellow Peter who said, "How can I feel grace when genocide is happening? And how can we feel grace when teenagers burn in a car, or when a teenager is dying of cancer it's just the very beginning of her adult life?" It goes back to that poem of Mary Oliver's that we have to learn to love what is mortal, to not spiritually bypass, to be touched by the tragedy, be touched by the suffering of others, be willing to be touched by your own suffering. Hold it against your bones as if your life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. The wonderful non-dual saint Nisargadatta said, "Sadhana, spiritual practice, is a search to what to give up." What to give up. So how can we, and this is what we'll be exploring today, how can we find a joy in life, a joy that transcends happiness and sadness, when genocide is going on, innocent people, and who isn't, in some sense, are dying? How can we find that joy and at the same time feel the sadness? How can we connect to an inner peace that is prior to all descriptions and concepts and opinions? How can we create a practice, a daily practice, a moment-to-moment practice that allows us to rest in grace, to make grief conscious? As I'm talking, I can go look at my bullet points on my notes, and I've got some great quotes. But at the same time, can I remember that this teenage girl a few miles away from here is dying, probably today, if not then very shortly. That the parents of these girls, the friends of these girls, the survivors, you can even, if you're interested, you can go to Marin car accident, and there are these graphic descriptions of what happened at the scene of the accident, how one girl was pulled out of the car over the dead bodies of her friends. All this stuff is going on every moment all over the world. It obviously is different when it happens in my backyard or your backyard, when it's my client rather than some anonymous person who's dying. So even in the most brutal times, we are called upon to see each other in the fullest, deepest, most respectful way that God has imagined. You could be that person. I could be that person. That person could be you who is suffering. And finding a practice that is strong enough, that is grounded enough, embodied enough, centered enough, that we can stay open to this rather than conceptualize it, keeping it at a distance, is a very delicate process. Again and again, we get lost in the suffering. Again and again, we push it away. We think about it. I mean, we can read the stories about deportation and genocide and traffic accidents and say, oh, that's a shame that's happening again. I myself am not sick at all, but I'm having like sort of a medical confluence of all these small little things. I had a skin cancer on my leg. I tore my rotator cuff. I'm going to 4 doctors next week. Nothing is threatening at all, but it just keeps reminding me that I've got this body that's being taken care of, and the can I be doing that with care but without attachment? And to me, without devotion to the path, without devotion to the lineage, without devotion to awareness itself, the path is often lonely and more difficult. Without devotion, we're never going to feel any intimacy between ourselves and the teachings. Even the Buddha himself, who didn't seem like a particularly devotional guy, said the awakening of faith or devotion is the dawn of realization, like a great light rising and shining within the heart. So what do you have faith in? Can we explore together here today, cultivating a devotion so deep that we can touch the suffering of the world and be touched by it, but not get lost in it? So many times I've repeated the line from Rumi, grief can be the garden of compassion. And I've also repeated so many times that this remarkable notion that the Tibetan Buddhists have, that compassion is a mixture of sadness and joy. So can we feel the grief that my client Indigo is dying and feel sadness, not get lost in the sadness, feel a joy that she's been liberated from a body that is not really working anymore? Can we feel sadness about the genocide in the Middle East, so many other injustices going on in the world? Can we really feel it? Can we be touched by it? Not push it away and not get lost in it? Can we make that movement from feeling the grief of separation to the connection of compassion. I'd like to read a few short quotes slowly as almost meditations. First, Thomas Merton. Do not look for rest in any pleasure, because you were not created for pleasure. You were created for joy. And if you do not know the difference between pleasure and joy, you have not yet begun to live. Hirvalai Khan. Like the mother of the world who carries the pain of the world in her heart, each one of us is part of her heart, and therefore each one of us is endowed with a certain measure of cosmic pain. You are sharing in that pain and are called upon to meet it in joy rather than self-pity. The secret: open your heart. Offer your heart as a vehicle to transform cosmic suffering into joy. The 16th Karmapa. You take it all in. You let the pain of the world touch your heart, and you turn it into compassion. So that fellow who was concerned about, if I feel grace, is that not being selfish? Is that not pushing away the fact that people are dying in genocide? I think we don't have to be concerned about being disloyal to our pain if we're being joyous. That, in fact, the people who are in pain, I think would rather have us, I know would rather have us feel expansiveness so we can be a force for healing in the world rather than be lost in pity. Pity, as we have talked about, is the near enemy of compassion. Pity is a quality of being separate, of not being equal to, feeling better than or worse than, pitting the people who are the victim of genocide rather than feeling equal. And the equality allowing us to feel compassion. So that grief and love are really like sisters, that we can't feel one without the other, to only to the extent that we're willing to feel our grief can we love. And only the extent that we're really willing to die into love will grief be bearable. So that there really isn't any love that doesn't have loss in it eventually. And there's no loss that we're going to experience that isn't going to remind us of the love that we feel for that person. Unresolved grief has a numbing effect. And these effects tend to accumulate and block our hearts. So we could go now into a kind of a Buddhist theoretical discussion of emptiness and the fact that the heart, the nature of the heart, the compassionate heart is an empty heart. It's empty of grasping, that there is no inherent self in the way that we usually conceptualize it, and go down that path. But I'd rather not go down that path. I'd rather talk in more intimate ways about how we can find the courage to be touched by suffering and not be closed by it. How can we cultivate a deep enough faith? What blocks this faith to be able to receive grace in a moment-to-moment way? And to me, there are certain developmental steps to this path. The first one is really taking a vow to stop running away from what we tend to run away from. Can we begin to look very nakedly and honestly at what we're using in our lives not to feel the sadness, not to feel the rawness, the humanness of what it is that's going on? Can we begin to embrace the ever changing quality of existence, embrace groundlessness, embrace egolessness? And even when I am talking to parents whose children are dying, or I'm looking at my own self and my reaction to these stories about the accident that happened a mile away from my house, it keeps coming back to me how essential it is to train oneself to remain in the body, to be with the felt sensations, to be with your inner experience in a way that's grounded, that's in a way that's centered in the lower chakras, that being able to work with fear, to be able to work with guilt, to be able to work with shame. I think soon I'd like to have a meeting here where we really go into these basics. We haven't done that for a long time. And it's great to talk about compassion. It's great to talk about love. But it's my experience that people coming to me, and when I look in the mirror, that these are wonderful ideas, but that it again and again, we're confronted by experiences in our lives that throw us into our minds, that we're unable to touch and be touched by the rawness of the human experience. So that beginning to train ourselves to be grounded, to be centered, to rest in calmness and openness and equanimity in simple moments first, and then when these more difficult ones arise, so that you might explore the notion of taking a vow not to do something, just as a way of noticing how these patterns unfold in your being. I have watched how in my life the major patterns I've had in the major patterns of how I avoid feeling things are gradually falling away. Addiction to entertainment, addiction to intoxication, addiction to certain kinds of relationships, addiction to certain kinds of ways of being in my mind. And it really goes back to that very first quote by Nisargadatta, where he says, sadhana is a search for what to give up. And that begins by being present not just conceptually, but by willing to be in your body, the body that keeps the score, and be willing to feel how uncomfortable it is when we read about suffering, when we see suffering, when we are suffering. And after we do that long enough, then we move into the heart level of practice, the bodhisattva vow, the making a commitment to leap into the pain of the world, to be willing to feel grief. My Guru Maharaji said, I love sadness. It makes me feel closer to God. And to the extent that we're seeking pleasure, we're seeking happiness, rather than seeking truth, seeking awakeness, sadness is often going to be an enemy. Sadness is going to be something we're trying to fix. There is a great deal to be sad about. There's a great deal to be angry about. And until we can feel those things directly, we're not inspired to take the kind of action that is needed to begin to create lasting change in the world. So that closing your heart and your mind to one person for 1 second breaks the bodhisattva vow. And we do that all the time. We take a vow that we know we're going to break again and again. The bodhisattva vow, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are inexhaustible. I vow to master them. The Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. Something that I might have mixed that up a little bit, but that was pretty close. Taking that vow, we realized we're going to break it again and again and again. But just realizing that that's the direction of our life, and that letting go of what gets in the way of living that, to me, is the juice of the path, having devotion to that commitment. And then the third vow is the tantric vow, which is the vow of really asking yourself about the nature of things, who we are. What is the bond between you and the teacher? What is the bond between you and the Dharma? How do we preserve the life force of that empowerment that we receive? So I was really struck by that fellow who responded to my Instagram post and saying he felt selfish in feeling grace when so many people were suffering. And it seems to me that by receiving grace, we're able to meet their suffering, to be with it, to realize that our hearts are boundless enough to be with all of that. What do you have faith in? What are you willing to receive? What are you willing to be touched by? What are you willing to reach out for? So, grace is a willingness to receive. Everything is grace. RamDev had this wonderful, horrible saying, suffering is grace. It's not the kind of grace that most of us are interested in finding moment to moment. But if, in fact, we are committed to awakening, then suffering is grace. It shows us the next step, the very next step, in the next moment, what to do because we're suffering. To feel it, to be touched by it, to be embodied, to feel the texture of it, to open our hearts to it, and to realize that even this is none other than grace. That each moment, no matter what the content is, is an expression of one of the faces of the divine. I didn't say that to the parents of the teenage girl who was dying, but I was feeling that as we were in the room together. And we're all in the room with her right now. Okay. Let's have some discussion, please. Possibly you don't have people close to you who are dying, and possibly you haven't been thinking much about genocide, but everybody's being touched by what's going on politically. I think that probably most of the people in this room are fairly insulated from the fallout of what's happening, at least immediately. That we're not immigrants who are in danger of being deported. I have one client who's a college professor. His wife is a physician, and she is of foreign extraction. And they're thinking that maybe they have to move to Canada. And he's a college professor, and she's a doctor, right? So it's easy, though, in spite of, I kind of gave a counter example of the point I'm trying to make, but I think most of us aren't worried about what's going to happen to us today. But I'm even thinking that the Living Dying Project, if Christian nationalism goes far enough, we might be marginalized. We're a corporate nonprofit structure. The IRS needs to keep approving of what we're doing so we can receive tax-deductible donations. That could change, because I talk about Buddhism sometimes. I talk about Hinduism sometimes, as well as talking about Christianity. Okay, Brooksy has his hand up.
I got my hand up. So what I've been thinking about with all of this stuff is, and with the work that I do, because I work in hospice, is thinking about how strongly we attach to expectations of results. It's like, well, if I did everything right, then I should get XYZ from this, right?
Yeah.
And part of the grieving process is discovering that it doesn't work that way. The Mary Oliver poem says that to me again and again.
Yeah.
And I have to be willing to let go of these expectations, including the one that says that if I do everything right, then it'll be okay. Because I don't know that until I get to the end of the trail and to see what's happened. But I know in my own personal life, learning how to let go of the idea that it has to be a certain way to be right has been an ongoing journey. And I become freer the freer I am to see what actually is happening, what actually is today, what the sky actually does look like, and what's happening to my neighbor, or what's happening in Gaza. And to see it not as something that I have control over, but that I can just participate in a spiritual practice. Or, maybe send them some bucks if I got bucks to send. But for me, it's all about letting go of the idea that it's got to be a certain way in order for it to be right, for it to be holy, for it to be practice, and to see all things as being equal in those places. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, somebody once asked Pema Chodron, how can I keep my heart open all the time? And she thought about it for quite a long time. And she said, well, what I've come up with and kind of surprises me is that the way to keep your heart open is to give up any hope for fruition, that what you do will bear fruit. And really, that's the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita. You do what you do, and then you offer the fruits of your actions to God. You do what you do, and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't work, and you're on to the next moment and the next moment. And that's particularly difficult for us Westerners, who are really very deeply socialized to get some sense of identity and meaning from accomplishment. And there's really not much talk about getting meaning from receiving or from letting go. So I heartily second what Brooksy had to say there. The Living Dying Project is at least in one dimension, about helping people die consciously or grieve consciously or caregive consciously. And yet, a lot of people, even here in Marin, which is supposedly a semi-enlightened spiritually place, people don't want to have us come into their lives because we've got the word dying in the name, and they say, well, I want to stay positive. I don't want to think about dying. I want to get well. And I have to explain to people that the Living Dying Project isn't about helping you die well. It's about healing into life itself. And the healing might be healing into dying. It might be healing into a physical cure. And that's not up to you or up to me. That's up to karma or God or the universe or whatever you want to call that. That's the extreme example. But can we bring that into a moment-to-moment thing? That what is the healing into the next moment? What is that slash between living/dying project? How does the fact we're going to die inform what we do in this next moment?
I thank you for this meeting today. I think I've talked before when I had an accident. It's been 2 years now, and I have really no sense of time, but it's been 2 years. So you either have to settle it or go to court. So I took a settlement. And the lawyer came by and said, well, now you can just go on with your life. And it was like a light switch. It didn't change what's really my emotional part. So I'm trying to find a new beginning. The truth is, I'm not interested in anything. So I'll just throw a dart at the dartboard and just try something because I don't know exactly what else to do. It's
What do you mean you're not interested in anything?
Well, somebody says, "Oh yeah, well now why don't you travel? Why don't you join this? Why don't you do this?" And I have no interest. I don't want to do any of those things, but I think I will find something, and I will be able to have a positive outlook instead of the way I feel now. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you for these. It's so meaningful to so many people.
So you said that you don't want to feel the way you feel now. How is it you feel now?
Feel a deep sadness and grieving for people who have died and for the accident. And I just I don't want to wallow in the sorrow. I still go out and, renew my car license and things like that. But in terms of going out and having any fun or joy, I don't see that in the future. I don't know how to do that anymore.
Okay. So you said you don't see how you could have fun or joy. And I could certainly understand how being in an accident where people died and there's been a lot of legal messiness probably in the meantime, and it really deeply affected your life, makes it harder to have fun. But my question then would be, is it possible to use the shock, the crisis, the deep insult that's happened to you to find a joy that transcends happiness and sadness? That maybe this part of your life isn't about traveling around or finding a new hobby or spending money in some exciting way, but in some way it seems like your heart is broken. And to use that brokenness to let God come in through the brokenness, or whatever it is you name that source of love, so that it's not so much about what you're doing or where your body's going or about fun and enjoyment, but what is being asked of you now? What is the message? What can you do with this part of your life? And it might very well be not what people are suggesting of running around and, woohoo, I have money now, I can do this and that. But being touched by the grief of the death and the loss and the injury and all that's happened, and use that to feel a deeper compassion for all beings. And maybe out of that, you choose to volunteer or just pray for other people or just spend time in nature. I don't know. And you don't know. But to me, there's a space has opened up that you have an opportunity to live in. It's not the life you had before the accident. And it's maybe not the life that people are suggesting. But to go that somehow the pain can possibly deepen your asking of what should I do next? How can I use this sadness and this pain to have a deeper experience of myself and my heart? Do you have good friends who support you?
No, most of my life is on the screen, all Zoom meetings. I don't have anyone in real form.
Where do you live?
In Studio City.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, you've been coming very regularly to these meetings, and I hope they've been bringing you some support. But certainly, it is possible to feel the sadness, feel the loss, and not be lost in it. To use it as a inspiration for deepening who you know yourself to be. And to ask for help, ask for support from your higher self, from God, from even if you don't have friends who are going to go for a walk with you around the block or in the park or whatever. I think it's possible to be very unlonely and be alone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mm.
Hi, Dale. I was writing down everything you said. It was very timely. Everything you were talking about just felt so relevant and so helpful. So thank you. My question is around feeling those kind of intense feelings of like maybe anger, grief. I've had a lot of lately, and how like I'm good at recognizing, naming them, but then how do you remember to take that space? Or is there a technique that you use that you have found effective in creating that space from it? Because I find even with quite a regular meditation practice for quite a long time, I I get so identified with it when it's a strong feeling like that. And I can kind of think about it afterwards and reflect on it and apply this knowledge or this wisdom to it. But at the time, it just feels like I get absorbed into it and I completely forget everything that you've just said. So,
Great.
yeah.
Welcome to the club. So, certainly it's very, very useful for many, many people to have a meditation practice where you set the world aside, you sit down, it's quiet, you shut your eyes or you're not looking at anything in particular, and you watch your mind and you watch your body. Maybe you bring in devotional qualities, and you pushed away all the quote distractions unquote, all the activity. But I spent several decades doing that and was incredibly successful at it and incredibly unsuccessful at integrating that into my life. And I was like a dynamite meditator and a neurotic mess at the same time, right? So that was kind of interesting for people, my friends particularly, got kind of a kick out of that. In fact, my friend said they liked me least after a meditation retreat and best when I was sick, which kind of gives you an idea of what was going on in my life. But the more I've stumbled down this path, it really feels like, how can I say this without sounding cliche? That to find some incredibly appealing practices that you can bring into daily life, something that's robust, something that has some juice for you. I see there behind you a picture of Hanuman on the wall. And it's the picture of Hanuman ripping his heart open when they said, "Hey, why aren't you at the party with Ram and Sita?" He said, "I don't need to go to your party. Ram and Sita are always in my heart." It's one of the most beautiful moments in the Ramayana story. So the three ways that I have found that work best for me is, one of them is Hanuman, is being of service, finding ways to be of service in the world. I run the Living Dying Project. Run is not quite the right word, but anyway, I do that thing. I work with dying people and grieving people and people who want spiritual support. And as I do it, I try to remember that I'm not doing it, that it's Hanuman's Living Dying Project. It's not me doing it. At first, when I started doing this, I would be embarrassed when I was beautiful. And I've gotten much better at being beautiful and knowing it's not me. It's just Hanuman, Maharaji, God, Christ, whatever. It's like, let the beauty flow through me and not be embarrassed about it. But that was the process. And because there were other people involved and other people who needed some support, it would call out the best in me. If I'm at the bedside of somebody who's dying and I'm distracted or I'm caught up in my own whatever it is, it really hurts my heart because I might never see this person again. Right. Whereas if I'm with my friend that I know I'm going to see tomorrow, provided we're both still alive, then, it's so that somehow finding these situations where lack of compassion is painful for me has been very useful. That's one thing. Another thing for me is embodiment. I used to be a mathematician. I was trained to figure out, understand, analyze, compartmentalize, conceptualize, and I was very good at that. I got a PhD from Stanford in figuring things out. And it almost killed me, literally. So for me, a lot of bringing practice into daily life is about being in my body, being grounded, being centered, being simple and easy. So what does it feel like when I'm in my body? What does it feel like when I'm not grounded and centered? And particularly when I'm, like right now, I'm talking to you, and I'd like to help you. And I'd like to realize it's not me doing it. But so what does it feel like? Am I getting caught in my head? What am I going to say next? I want to be great or something, be helpful. Or can I trust this dropping down, letting go of me doing it? There's a sense of surrender and receiving and openness. It's a felt sense in my body that more and more I notice when it's not there. And to trust that. And what's more important? Is it more important to think that I've got to help you, or that I have to be present and let the helping happen through me? And that's a process that's been going on for decades, right? Of being able to notice that. But the third thing, which is really fundamental for me, is mantra. That just remembering God all the time, remembering that you're God and I'm God, and that Donald Trump is God, and not in the sense of spiritually bypassing and saying it's all perfect, but saying it's all perfect, but it's human and there's suffering, and we need to be active and engaged in all those things at the same time. And mantra can happen at all kinds of levels, of reaching out and invoking and not feeling much, to feeling this connection, to this tantric relationship with mantra, where when I say Ram, that completely manifests Ram. The sound and the deity is the same thing. In fact, a client of mine turned me onto this book called Sound Medicine by an Indian physician and Ayurvedic doctor. Her last name is Chowdhury. Sound Medicine. It's got, I don't know if she intended it to have two meanings, but it's about sound and mantra. But she's a scientist, and it's really a wonderful book. It's on Amazon for, I don't know, $15 or whatever. So those three things, they're all kind of the same thing in a way. They kind of intertwine. But finding something that, suppose you were in a car and you're, I'm thinking of those girls who were in that car. The car's on fire and the door doesn't open, the seatbelt won't release. What do you do in that moment? You're probably not going to start watching your breath, right? You're probably not going to start meditating. What are you going to do? Are you going to completely freak out, or are you going to remember God? Or are you going to say a mantra? To me, I would expect that hopefully I would take that second path of saying a mantra. And let me tell one of my favorite RamDev stories, which some of you have heard me tell it before. But I was living in Santa Fe. RamDev and I and a friend, Richard, the three of us had been living together outside Santa Cruz, California. We moved to New Mexico, and my friend Richard organized a rafting trip down the Rio Grande during spring runoff. It's a very dangerous river. People die there every year. And instead of being in a raft, we did it in big inner tubes, which was almost impossible to steer. And just to make it more interesting, we decided we'd take a major dose of psilocybin, right? So we get in the river, and it's so scary that I forgot even I had taken mushrooms. And we went through this thing. It took like about hour and a half. We got to the end of the ride. And to do this, you need two trucks. You need one at the beginning and one at the end. So then and two people have to get in one of the trucks and go back and get the truck that was the drop-off point at the beginning. So Ramdas and my other friend Jai, not Jai Uttal, but another guy, got in Jai's truck, which was parked right at the edge of the river. There's like a drop-off 30 feet down into the river, 50 feet, I don't know, big boulders. The truck is right on the edge. And they got in the truck, still on psilocybin, and there was a picture of Maharaji on Jai's truck's dashboard, and Ramdas saw the picture. And it was one of those moments when it's not a picture, it's actually Maharaji was there, right? It was like real. It was not a pointing at something, it was it. And he said, Maharaji, now I've got you. I'm not going to let you go. This time, I'm not going to ever let you go. Jai put the key in the ignition. It was a standard transmission car. The car lurched. It was in gear and it lurched toward the abyss. And Ramdas went, ah! And within 5 seconds, he had forgotten about Maharaji. He said, I'm never going to forget you. And then 5 seconds later, he got lost in fear. Right. So that happens to all of us. I'm not saying that he was a particularly difficult case. But I guess the point here is that those moments will appear again and again and again. How quickly do you come back? Right. And it's great to have a deep, quiet sitting practice, but it's also really useful to find ways to be in the world where you maintain equanimity. Equanimity is the protector of the heart. Equanimity protects loving kindness from turning into attachment. It protects compassion from turning into pity, the near enemies of those qualities. So how do you find equanimity? How do you find, what practice do you have in the chaos and messiness of human existence? Might not be the same things for you as it is for me. Ask Hanuman, he will tell you. Rip your heart open like that. Feel those nails going into the skin and ripping it open and saying, Hanuman.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. What a great opportunity to say fun things.
It was a great story as well.
Take
Thanks,
good care.
Thanks, RamDev. Okay, bye, everybody. Take care.